Alternate historians love extending the lifetime of empires, especially the short-lived ones. A popular one is, of course, Alexander III of Macedon's empire, but another empire that gets used a lot is known today as the Carolingian Empire. For less than a century, this medieval empire appeared to be the reborn Western Roman Empire, until it fell apart, so you can see why people might want to give it a new lease on life. But before we can do that, we need to understand why it collapsed in the first place, and I have just the book to recommend. Hello everyone, I'm Matt Mitrovich, the Alternate Historian. Let's talk about the 2024 book, Oathbreakers, The War of Brothers That Shattered an Empire and Made Medieval Europe by Matthew Gabriele and David M. Perry. FYI, the authors were kind enough to send me a copy to review. Now, Oathbreakers details the collapse of the Carolingian dynasty. For those who don't know, the Carolingians were a dynasty of kings who ruled the Franks, a Germanic-speaking people who moved in and controlled much of what we know today as France, Germany, the Low Countries, Switzerland, northern Italy, northeastern Spain, and a bits of other pieces of Europe. You might have heard of some Carolingians, like Charles Martel, who famously defeated an invading Muslim army at the Battle of Tours in 732, or his son Pepin, who overthrew the reigning Merovingian dynasty and installed himself and thus his family as the rulers of the Franks. And of course, there's Pepin's son, Charles, aka Charlemagne, who expanded the Frankish Empire to its greatest extent and was crowned Emperor of Rome in a sort of resurrection of the Western Roman Empire. But that is all just prologue for Oathbreakers. This book is about the Carolingians that came afterwards and brought this new Rome down, such as Charlemagne's son, Louis the Pious, who succeeded him as King of the Franks and Emperor of Rome. We see Louis try to keep the empire together, but instead his terrible decisions only widen the divisions that will ultimately destroy the empire when his sons, Lothar, Louis the German, and Charles the Bald, divided between themselves after the bloody Battle of Fontenoy of 1841 and the resulting Treaty of Verdun. Now, I think Oathbreakers did a pretty good job cataloging step by step how the Frankish world collapsed in ways that are both entertaining and relevant to the present. Gabriele and Perry would break up the narrative with dramatizations of certain key events, or retellings of stories of the age that were subtly attempting to influence the monarchs. These range from a coup attempt against Charlemagne by his oldest son, to warnings from a demon who found the strife-filled empire an easy place to invade. It was also incredibly frustrating to see Louis the Pious deal with the constant coup attempts against him, most led by his own sons. Even when he survived them and restored himself to the throne, he would never sufficiently punish them, and indeed would allow the perpetrators to return to their positions of wealth and power. There's a good line about this on page 126. But even though mercy was a key virtue for rulers to display, it destabilizes a society when elites attempt a coup, fail, yet suffer few consequences. Yeah, I think Americans are going to experience what it felt like to be a Frank over the next few years. Anywho, I also enjoyed how Oathbreakers address some of the misconceptions of this era. For example, the authors take time to point out that relations between the Christian and Islamic worlds were more complex than some might think. Rather than being a clash of civilizations where one was trying to wipe out the other, Christian and Muslim rulers often traded with each other, tolerated subjects of different faiths, and even formed alliances against other Christian or Muslim rivals. More importantly, the book pushes back at the claims later nationalist historians made about this era. Rather than this being the start of the modern nations of France and Germany, Gabriele and Perry take time to point out how tenuous this connection is. The grandchildren of Charlemagne were not trying to start new nations in their squabble. Rather, at best, they were fighting for what they perceived was the proper way to organize the Frankish Empire, or at worst, were just trying to get as much power and wealth for themselves as possible. Indeed, ideas like France and Germany would likely appear quite alien to Charlemagne's grandsons if they ever traveled to our present. But this is an alternate history channel, so where is the alternate history? Well, Oathbreakers is a straightforward history book, but Gabriele and Perry don't shy away from the occasional counterfactual. This book is chock full of potential points of divergence of how the Frankish Civil War could have been prevented or ended sooner, thus preserving the new empire. Indeed, the book has a line that I am definitely going to use in the future, which is, and I quote, "The past is always messy, human, and filled with people who made choices and who could have chosen otherwise." Unfortunately, the authors don't speculate on what could have happened if the Carolingian Empire stayed united. I don't blame them, given that this is beyond the scope of the history they were trying to tell, but for an alternate historian like me, I was curious to hear their thoughts. Personally, I think given the trends at the time, and considering the Frankish practice of men dividing their possessions equally among their sons, that had the Carolingian Empire survived, it would have evolved into something like the Holy Roman Empire that succeeded it. A patchwork of tiny states with their own autonomy that is led by an emperor whose ability to make them do anything in concert is severely limited. This might be disappointing for some to hear, but considering the Holy Roman Empire existed for 1,000 years, it really is the best case scenario for this alternate Carolingian Empire. Anywho, that is my review of Oathbreakers. I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you need to research your own what if on the Franks, or if you are a fan of the Fall of Civilizations podcast. Well, that's all to say on the subject. If you enjoy what I do, please like, comment, subscribe, click that bell icon, share this video, support me on Patreon. I'm Matt Mitrovich, the Alternate Historian. Bye.